Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to Fusion, favorite Fusion solo albums, I guess we're going to call this, right? Along with George Lamie in the co-captain's chair. We did a whole month on my favorite solo albums by members of notable bands. Martin Popoff and I did a whole solo album thing on Friday Morning to Funhouse recently, but George and I have been talking about doing this for well over a month, trying to figure out what some of our favorite fusion albums, solo albums are. And we went through a lot of iterations on this, right, George? Because we're like, some are more bands and we don't really want to do that. But then some were kind of a band, but the lineup changed every album. And some, these guys were always solo artists, right? And they were never part of a band. So there's, like for instance, Miles Davis. I really wanted to put Miles on this list, but I'm like, but Miles was always really a solo artist. So I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not like he did a couple solo albums. He always did solo records, right? Or, so whatever you want to call it. So I didn't include Miles in my list, and there's some that might be kind of floating the line here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot of good stuff. And as George and I have been talking for the last couple of days, I mean, my list is probably very heavy in the 70s, while I think George is probably going to show off more stuff from post 70s stuff, which is cool. But we'll see how it goes. We have a lot here. We got 40 records to quickly show and talk about. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on each, but we want to kind of let you know what we really dig about these as quickly as we can. So with that being said, George, should we just go real quick, boom, 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 round robin, or should we do chunks at a time? I don't know.
Let's see. We want to break it into threes since we got
Okay,
like
yeah,
20.
yeah, let's do that. That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, so we'll have George kick us off with his. I guess for us, we didn't put these in any real order. These are just our 20 favorites. So we'll just, I guess, 20, 19, and 18. Go for it, George.
Mine are not in a strict order, but they're kind of in clumps. Like my first group is the creme de la creme, and then it kind of, slowly tapers. But
Okay. I didn't do any such order because it's impossible for me. So you just getting
yeah,
a whole bunch of mine that are all over the place. So yeah.
it's vague. Don't write it down. I'm not gonna hold to it. But the number one is for me, I just can't think of anything that's more emblematic of a fusion solo album that I love. LD Meola, Elegant Gypsy.
Yep.
Coming out of Return to Forever, Chick always encouraged the guys to be solo artists, even though they're all kids, especially Demiola. He's 20 years old on the first, 19 years old when they recorded Where Have I Known You Before. So he's 22 years old on this. This is his first solo album outside the confines of the band, because the first one he did, he was still in the band. But this is the ultimate. There's one kind of throwaway acoustic guitar thing, but the other five tracks are just all-time fusion slammers. So you had to have it. And number two, Tetsuo Sakurai, Gentle Hearts. This is his longtime Cassiopeia bassist. It's one of those things where you hear about an album first and it whets your appetite. You got the all-world drummer Dennis Chambers and a shrapnel guitar hero and Greg Howe. Could that be as good as I think it could be? And a lot of times that doesn't deliver, but this time, this is a sledgehammer. 8 tracks and two of them are ballads, but the other six are so good, you just don't care. Just sledgehammer playing from all three guys, and it's a must-have of 2000s fusion.
Yeah, it's a great one. We featured that one on a very early episode of For Fusion Friday, and it was my first time hearing it. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Really, really good stuff.
My number three is kind of one of these gray area tracks that I didn't even think of it as that until I put it under the microscope. Jean-Luc Ponty. I think of him as both the Mahavishnu Orchestra band and from Zappa's band.
Yeah.
So you think this is after those, it's a solo album, but he did have a couple solo albums previous to being in those bands. So this is kind of gray area, but gotta have it. This is another one of those one-time lineup things. He worked with some of these guys here and there, but not together. And then Steve Smith is a total anomaly in this album. And again, it just so happens that the players lined up with the songs, and this is an all-time classic for pretty much anybody that likes this genre. So,
Yep.
John Bonnie.
Sure. Well, I might as well start off there as well. I picked it from my list as well. And yeah, I mean, he did come from Zappa and Mahavishnu, and we always think of like he did have a pretty solid band for a while, but there it was always rotating players, especially on this one. I mean, yeah, Sturmer and Holdsworth on here, and just the great lineup. Amazing album, one of the great fusion albums of all time. I'm gonna pick Demiola too, but I tend to always go for Land of the Midnight Sun just by a smidge. Although I think Elegant Gypsy is just absolutely classic. You can't go wrong with either one. To me, I almost put both of them on this list, but then I'm like, I don't like to repeat artists here. But yeah, for me, there's just a couple tracks on here that just absolutely blow my mind, maybe just a tiny bit more than what's on Elegant Gypsy, but I love them both. So um, it's amazing how great he was at such a young age, George. I mean, he literally comes out of that band, which is one of the greatest bands of all time, releases this, and it's just like, wow, this guy is so accomplished at such an early age. And then he does those two, those three, those four albums in a row that are just mind blowers. So yeah, Land of the Midnight Sun, and we're gonna go into the '80s here. This is the second solo album from this guy. I almost picked this first. I love both of them almost equally, but I think the songs and the compositions are a little bit better here. And it's Mike Stern, Time and Place.
Yeah.
Man on the Stratocaster, right? Or is that a broadcaster? Whatever it is. It's an old guitar, of course, coming out of the Miles Davis band and going solo and never looking back. And he's got produced by Steve Kahn. He's got Bob Berg alongside him on the early albums on saxophone, and I think they were a great pairing. But this is just awesome stuff. Great guitar soloing, but really, really good, memorable composition. So those are my first three: Mike Stern, Time and Place, Land in the Midnight Sun by Al D, and Enigmatic Ocean. Jean-Luc Ponty.
All right. Kind of a no-brainer. Billy Cobham, Spectrum. Coming out of Mahavishnu Orchestra. He was the only guy in the band that wasn't politicking to get his compositions used. And I think we know why, because he was stockpiling these things. And he comes out and just blew everyone away as a composer. Just an all-time classic. Next, Ruford. This is a guy who comes from a prog background and decides to go fusion, and the results are really good. There's two other ones that both fail a little bit in certain ways with the lineup and with inclusion of pointless vocals. This is the one you want. It's got it all together. Total classic.
Yeah.
Number returner forever guy, Stanley Clark. Would have been real easy to pick one of the 70s ones, obviously, but this one in 2010 blew me away. I had given him up for dead, like a lot of people at that point in time. And this album, it's like a Derek Sherinian Planet X thing. It's a Stanley Clark album called Stanley Clark Band that was going to be an ongoing thing. So this is the only one that's got Hiromi. It's got a guitar player named Charles Altura that completely blows the doors down. Particularly the second half of this album just annihilates. So if you've given up on them like most people, look into this one.
Cool. Yeah, it would be easy to go back to one of the '70s albums, which is why I did. So I'm gonna go with the first Stanley Clark. Stanley Clark. I love this album. School Days gets all the acclaim as far as like his greatest '70s album, and it's great. I kind of like this one a little bit more, just a little bit more. I mean, it's just got great. I mean, the lineup here, I'll just list them off really quick because I think it needs to be mentioned. But you've got the great Jan Hammer on here. You got Billy Connors on here, right? So there's that RTF connection. You got Tony Williams on drums. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And I think that Billy just absolutely smokes on this album. The whole band is just really, really good. I love this. It's not as kind of funky as School Days, which is like, it's not as accessible as that, but I like it because it goes a little bit different places. So I will pick that. I'm also going to pick the Bruford. I have it all on this little collection here, but that One of a Kind is a terrific album. This was, Bruford, with George and I went back and forth on do we include Bruford or not, because it's kind of a band, but yet every album is a different lineup, right? So we just decided, screw it, we'll put it in here. But really, really cool stuff. Interesting how, like you mentioned, he comes from a prog background, and then you had UK, which is kind of prog, but also a little fusion. And then he went and let's just do the fusion thing with this. Let's bring Holdsworth with him. And yeah, amazing stuff. And then, yeah, you can't not pick Spectrum, right?
Can't.
Great songs on here, great playing on here. I think a stroke of genius to bring Tommy Bolin on board for here. And Tommy Bolin all of a sudden shows that he can do the fusion thing as well. Great stuff. Some classic songs on here. And, you know, it's still his best album, in my opinion, although there's smoke and stuff on other albums. But I think it's the best album, start to finish, from any Billy Cobham solo album. So there you go. My next three.
For Clark, you like Journey to Love too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those three, in my opinion, are untouchable. Just really great.
All right, my next one, Don Hommer, coming out of Mahavishnu. He did one collab album with Jerry Goodman, did a space rock album, and then he decided to go full bore fusion here. This album, completely great production. The opener and closer blow you away. Magical Dog and Red and Orange. Fantastic stuff. The closest that anyone outside of Mahavishnu got to Mahavishnu is probably this. This is really good. Next, Dave Weckl, Master Plan.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the first solo album coming out of Electric Band. Actually, still an Electric Band in this. This came out in 1990, same year as Inside Out. It's got a little bit of Inside Out flavor on a couple of tracks. Chick is on board. He wrote the title track, which is one of those tunes. Drum duet with Steve Gadd on that. You got Michael Brecker on this album. You got Anthony Jackson on this album. It's got a little bit of that GRP thing going on, but mostly good stuff. And Weckl, just the production, the drumming, it's incredible. And the last one, Elaine Kon, La Band. Uzeb, Canadian band, and put out 8 or 9 records in the 80s. They pretty much were one of the fusion bands of the 80s. He goes solo, puts out this quartet record. Incredible production, really good songs. One of the underrated bass players of the genre. Highly recommend this one.
That's a good one.
Caroline.
Good stuff. Did you ever, speaking of Jan Hammer, did you ever hear the first album he did with Neil Schon?
No.
It's good, but I really wanted them to do like a blistering all out instrumental fusion affair, and there's like vocals on there and stuff, but what's good on there is really good. But yeah, I remember when that came out, I was like, this is going to be great. And then I'm like, yeah, this is okay. All right. Next up, again, this is another one, arguably sort of a band, but it's the first one. Herbie Hancock's Headhunters, coming out of Mwandishi, right? He takes that kind of bizarro, funky fusion thing and makes it a little bit more accessible. He would call the band going forward Headhunters, but we had like kind of like a rotating cast of characters there for a few albums, which is absolutely amazing. Funky fusion from that time period. Alphonse Mouzon, Mind Transplant. This is kind of, to me, the sister album to the Billy Cobham album, because here it's basically Mouzon doing something very similar and bringing Tommy Bolin along for the ride as well. So just really cool, very memorable song-based fusion with lots of funk overtones. And I mean, this guy is such a sick drummer as well. I think Alphonse just never really got the credit due, and just some amazing playing on here. The grooves are outstanding. Great synth and guitar work on here. Just a really amazing album. And then we're going to fast forward into the late 80s here for Kazumi Watanabe, The Spice of Life 2. You got Bill Bruford along for the ride. You got Jeff Berlin along for the ride. Just amazing stuff. And one of my favorite fusion albums from the 80s. I love Kazumi. He's got so many albums. I could have picked any number of them. I'm sure George is going to pick something from him coming up. But yeah, this is just really good, and really good songwriting too. Really good, memorable tunes on here. Great guitar playing. Just absolutely top-notch musicianship.
I never checked into the veracity of it, but if you read the credits to the Mouzon, it gives songwriting credits to his wife, the whole album.
I never looked at that.
Yeah,
Elvina Mouzon. Wow.
Yeah. If that's actually true, that's something else.
All tunes composed by Elvina Mouzon. Yep. It's crazy. Alphonse on drums and synths, Tommy Bolin guitar, Jay Graydon on guitar, Lee Ritenour guitar, Jerry Peters, Fender Rhodes, Henry Davis on bass, Yeah, she doesn't play a lick on it, but I guess she composed and wrote the whole album. Go figure.
Wild.
I mean, well, what else has she done? I don't know.
All right.
It's a pretty crazy album, right? And you think, yeah, it's
Oh yeah, it's driving stuff
yeah.
for the cheesy 70s vocals and a couple tracks, but the
Mm,
one track.
yeah.
Yeah. My next one,
Oh, forgot all about that. Yeah.
it's co-build, but realistically, his brother did, he just played drums and Holdsworth just sent in solos. He didn't even meet them. So this is a Jens Johansen album. This is a guy coming out of metal to do two fusion albums. This is the first one, 1996. It's pretty loose, modal jams, composed heads, but just kind of a fun jamming record. But yeah, if you're a Holdsworth fan, you got to have it. The caffeinated track, Good Morning, Mr. Coffee, got a duel between Jens and Alan that has to be heard to be believed. And the production, I really like the production on this. It's not super finished, it's more raw, but it just sounds really good. Definitely check it out. And its sister album, Fishin', it's really good too.
Yeah, they're both excellent, excellent.
Next was Steve Weingart, Dark Blue Dream. This is the Dave Weckl band keyboard player gone solo. Um, if you haven't heard this one, Pete, I think you're going to want to check it out. He's
Not
very, very out of the Chick Corea school. A lot of Rhodes, a lot of 90s electric band sounds with the keyboard patches and the band on here. You got Frank Gambale on the whole album. He doesn't do whole album sessions that much, so I know you're going to be interested in that. The rhythm section is Jimmy Earl and Tom Breckline. So you got strong rhythm section play, but just good songs, really good tunes. It's 2006. And T. Lavitt's School of the Arts. This was one we talked about on 4 Fusion. Dreg's keyboard player gone solo. He had done some 80s records for Passport that were pretty spotty, honestly. Then he starts working for Tone Center, and he had improved greatly as a songwriter, I think. This one is one of those dream lineup things that is going to work out. He's got Gambale, Weckl, Patitucci, and Morse on here. And for me, came through. If I had a beef, there is a lack of, I wanted it to be more open and jammy. It's real composed,
really
but
composed.
yeah, they're great compositions. And I remember you had some reservations. It's too acoustic. I would agree with that too. I wish it was at least mixed, but I can't complain because I really enjoy it. So
That's what it's all
T
about.
Levitt's. Yep.
Cool. All right. So my next pick, I had to include him here, even though overall throughout his career he doesn't really fit in the fusion category. And he's got two albums that I was looking at. One of them, though, is my favorite of the two, but I think of that more as an instrumental rock album with fusion elements. I think this pick is more of the true fusion album. It's Jeff Beck Wired. Love, I mean, this is,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Blow by Blow is my favorite of the two, but I've never really considered that a true fusion album, whereas I think this absolutely is. I love the compositions. We talked about it on 4 Fusion Friday. He didn't write any of these songs, right? He just basically shows up and lets everybody else put everything together. But yeah, you got Jan Hammer on here. It's just amazing stuff. I've loved this for decades. Just killer album. I'm gonna go Sean Lane, The Powers of 10. Mind blowing. I have to thank George for turning me on to this album. Yeah, this is just coming out of left field, coming from Mars or Uranus, whatever you want to call. Sean Lane was on another level, and just really interesting, different type of compositions here. There's some really interesting keyboard work on here, and then the mind-blowing guitar solos are just like from another planet. If you haven't heard Sean Lane's solo work, it's fusion. It's fusion from another universe, but it's just amazing. This is just a killer album. And then I'm going to go with Mingo Lewis, Flight Never Ending. So of course Mingo Lewis has played with a lot of the greats of the day. You got a couple tracks on here that would later be used by Mr. Al Di Meola. This is very similar to Al Di Meola's first two solo albums. If you like that sort of thing, got the kind of like the Latin fusion thing going on. Great guitar work. The percussion and the drums is off the charts. Just a killer album that I didn't get till a couple of years ago. Never owned this till fairly recently, and it's just a mind blowing, essential fusion album from the '70s.
Yeah, it wasn't a CD till like the mid 2000s. It was one of
Yeah,
those vinyl titles that just languished.
yeah, yeah. Great, and that's the only one he ever did.
Yeah.
Straight.
All right. My next grouping. This is a fusion guy that this album really isn't fusion. It's more instrumental prog, but fusion guy Andy West coming out of the dregs does this album Rama 1. I don't know why it's Rama 1. There was no Rama more. So, but I thought it would be of interest just because a lot of the names you got Mike Keneally, you got Rod Morgenstein, Mike Portnoy, Jens Johansen, Jonathan Mover, Kit Watkins. I mean, who's who on here? And it is really good instrumental prog. So I thought it rated a mention.
It is good. I haven't heard that in ages. Yeah, I forgot all about that album.
It's got an identity that doesn't sound like anything else. So you wish Andy West had done more, but there's not a lot out there.
Yeah.
The next one, Kirk Covington, Gamelan Road, this drummer from Tribal Tech. He's got a string of albums. Some of them are more like blues vocal albums, but he does have instrumental albums. This is the latest one. It's co-billed to Carter Arrington, which is a guitar player for a band called Prager, but I don't have credits, so I have no idea how involved he actually is. Uh, this is unusual, but it's really good. It's got a couple of vocal tracks that actually work, and it's got some heavy stuff. It's kind of all over the place, but it's really interesting if you want to try something different. And the last one of this group, Koichi Iori, Bloomfield. This is a slammer.
Yeah. That's
Brad's guitar player, his fourth solo album. This one he uses American musicians on quite a bit of it. You got Gary Novak on drums, Scott Kinsey on keyboards, Robin Ford guests on a couple of tunes, and then his wife plays keyboards on a couple of tunes. Kayomi Otaka, she's one of the great keyboard players over there. But really good kind of I don't know, it's kind of a mixed bag of fusion on here, but definitely worth checking out. Koichi Iori Bloomfield.
That's an excellent album. Really, really good. Good choice. All right. Where are we at anyway? What do we got? Six more to go?
Yep.
Okay. John McLaughlin, electric guitarist. You know, he's got a bunch of solo records. He's got these solo bands. He's got stuff he did, collaborations he did in the '60s, of course, from Miles Davis and Mahavishnu Orchestra. But I always really like this album a lot because he's basically got his former mates in both Mahavishnu and Tony Williams' Lifetime on board for most of these songs. I think it's really good. Runs the gamut of everything we love about McLaughlin. I highly recommend that. Electric guitarist, Larry Coryell Spaces. Again, early '70s release. This has got McLaughlin on it as well. Billy Cobham's on drums, Miroslav Vitus on bass, Chick Corea on electric piano. You can't go wrong with a lineup like that. It's spacey. It's just of its time, right? But just classic fusion. I love the duels with McLaughlin on here, and I always thought Coryell was a really good guitar player. Maybe not on that upper echelon of guys we hold so dear from that era, but I think he's up there. And then I'm going to go with Alan Holdsworth. Metal Fatigue, easily my favorite Holdsworth album. I had to have something from him on here. Some of his more memorable tracks are on here. The Unmerry-Go-Round, Panic Station, Devil Take the Hindmost. Some of his best soloing, whether you like the vocal stuff or not, I guess that's up to you. But I don't mind him, and I think this is pretty consistent as far as his output goes.
All right. I got a Koichi Iori, so I had to do a Kozo Suganuma.
There you go.
Drummer from Fragile. He also has several solo albums, and they're all actually worthwhile. I could have picked any of them, but I picked this one. It's got interesting guests on it. Akira Takasaki on a couple of tracks, Billy Sheehan on a couple of tracks, Koichi Iori's on it, and that's always a good thing when you see him because he always contributes songs, and he's one of the best writers in the genre. So this one's called Convergence.
Ah,
This is another one we talked about on For Fusion Friday. Bill Connors, Step It. You know, he had kind of disappeared off the map at the end of the 70s, and he
totally.
pops back.
Did a lot of acoustic stuff, and yeah, just
Yeah, classical stuff and the straight ahead stuff. He pops back up in 1984 with this trio. Tom Kennedy on bass and very young Dave Weckl on drums. This is one of his first recorded sessions. Really good stuff. As long as you don't mind it bearing a strong resemblance to Holdsworth and the lead playing. I, I for one find that the songs more robust, less esoteric, so it works out for me. And David Gilmore, Unified Presence. This guy was in three bands at the same time in the early 90s, early to mid 90s that I listened to. Lost Tribe, uh, Five Elements, which was a Steve Coleman band, and Crazy Saints, which was Trilak Gertrude's band. And he went solo in like 2001. This one's 2006. A little different for him. He's featuring acoustic on a lot of it. And the rhythm section also playing acoustic instruments, but not playing straight ahead, playing fusion stuff just on acoustic instruments. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, but well worth checking out. David Gilmore, Unified Presence.
you have to wonder, is he a McLaughlin fan? It's almost like he's going for the whole look and everything, and even I guess the tone of the album is probably very similar, right?
Yeah.
All right. Lenny White, Venusian Summer. Killer album. I really like a good chunk of Lenny's solo stuff. You know, he got a little kind of funky R&B later on, but I think his 70s stuff is really good. This is from 75. I mean, just listen to the people who are on this. Aldo Meola, Larry Coryell, David Sanchez, Jimmy Smith, Larry Young, Ray Gomez. I love Ray Gomez, Doug Roush. I mean, just littered with great players on here. And it's just amazing how like some of these very well-known drummers each had one or two standout fusion albums during this era, and I like this one the best out of all of these. But he's got a couple that are complete bangers. Uh, Wayne Shorter, Supernova. So this is like late 60s. So this album I think greatly influenced by his time spent in Miles's band, greatly influenced by In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew. Kind of similar tone on here. He's got McLaughlin on here. He's got Sonny Sharrock on here. Miroslav Vitus is on here. Dijonette, Korea, they're all on here. Arierto Moreira. Great lineup. Very spacey, atmospheric, electric jazz, just at the beginning of the fusion era, and some of Wayne's best saxophone playing. I think Wayne Shorter is one of the greats of all time. Such a good composer, and just when you hear him, you always know it's Wayne. So yeah, Supernova, and then let's see. I got a lot of honorable mentions. I'm trying to figure out which one am I going to do for my last one here. You know what? Let's go with David Sanchez, Just As I Thought. Really cool album from the former E Street member. He can play it all. He's a great keyboard player, great guitar player. He's got all sorts of guest stars on here. But yeah, this just really ripping fusion. His first two solo albums, I think, are his best, and just amazing stuff. And it's just amazing what a great player he is on both instruments. You know, he's a multi-instrumentalist, but he's like a virtuoso on all of them. So yeah, just as I thought, David Sanchez will be my final pick. Got any honorables, George?
Oh, I still have a group of three left.
Oh, we not okay, cool. Hey, that's good. All right.
Oh, actually two. No. Yeah. I don't know how I got to where I'm at. No,
I don't
three.
know. I
Yeah.
haven't been keeping count, so I don't know. But I still have more CDs sitting here, so we can keep going.
All right. I have three left here. Let's
Okay, perfect.
Antoine Fafard,
Oh yeah,
Odd to him. This is the bass player from the Canadian prog fusion band Spaced Out. He's went solo in the 2000s and he's put out a string of really good records. Um, this one as Vinnie Colaiuta, Jerry DeVilliers Jr., the Jerry DeVilliers Jr., if you ask Eric.
the
Um, just you can't go wrong with any of his records, but this one just happens to be my favorite. This one's a little obscure. Indro Harjo Decoro, Get Closer. This is the bass player for both Topati Bertiga and Topati Ethno Mission, which are Indonesian bands, led by the guitar player Topati Arya. But Indro's solo albums are really good also. He doesn't get a chance to cut loose that much on Topati records, but this one's really good. And the last one I pulled David Sanchez, Forest of Feelings. His debut, former Bruce Springsteen and E Street Band keyboard player. So a guy coming out of classic rock and doing a record that probably knocked people on their heads at the time, considering the style difference. It's fusion, but there's touches of prog and classical.
Yeah.
Just great playing across the board. And he introduced the world to his rhythm section, hot rhythm section. It's just a very good record. I agree with Pete that the early ones are really good, but also I like the one he picked just as I thought. That's a great record. But yeah,
I was a toss-up between either one of them because they're both great.
yeah. Forest of Feelings, 1975. Supposedly the best year in recorded music, according to somebody.
I wonder who that is.
Yeah.
All right. This was 1975. Terry Ripdahl, Odyssey on the ECM label. Great Norwegian guitar player. He also plays sax and keyboards and whatnot. He's got a cool group of Norwegian fusion and jazz guys on here. This is really cool. It's kind of proggy too. It's like really, really interesting. This is probably out of all the ones I've talked about the most different, but it's to me, it's his classic album. You need to hear his looping guitar sounds and noises and things like that. And guy's really good at composing as well. So this is an excellent, excellent album. Another weird one, David Torn, Cloud About Mercury. Right, got Mark Isham is on here, Tony Levin and Bill Bruford, great rhythm section. This again also on the ECM label. I think there's a lot of gems on the ECM label as far as fusion goes from the 70s and the early 80s. This is 1987 actually. But if you like any of the fusion stuff that Tony Levin and Bruford have been involved in, I think you'll really dig this. David Torn is a totally unique guitar player. He uses a lot of loops, very different style of playing. This is very atmospheric, very avant-garde, but I love it. Really, really good. Easily my favorite solo album from him. And then let's go Miroslav Vitus, Infinite Search, another classic album. This is from the early 70s, 1970 as a matter of fact, and this has got John McLaughlin on it, Jack DeJohnette. Awesome stuff. I love his bass playing. I like, I'm a big Weather Report fan, but I think I like the Miroslav version of Weather Report, the early lineup of Weather Report. And it's like, if you like that sort of stuff, that's what you get on here. It's very melodic. Herbie Hancock's on here as well. Just really great early 70s fusion or jazz rock, as it's probably closer to. Excellent stuff. Great composition. He wrote all the tunes on here and really good. It's good to hear McLaughlin playing with him as well. So.
It's funny watching your list and seeing stuff that I zoned on. Like I zoned on Domingo Lewis. I zoned on DeShawn Lane. I didn't see it on your list, but I zoned on picking a Chick Corea album. I could have said I like the
I wanted to.
Yeah.
I a lot of his just solo records I like, but I don't know if they're top 20. Like if we were gonna pick, if we were gonna include a Return to Forever or Electric Band album, that's a different story, but that's more of a band type thing. So yeah, I was looking at the Mad Hatter and a couple others. I'm like, they're good. I don't know if they're upper echelon though,
No, I always felt those could have been better that period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between Return to Forever and Electric Band,
you got any left you haven't talked about yet?
No, I actually don't. What do you got?
All right, I got some that are just kind of sitting here. I got the first Larry Carlton, self-titled. Love this album. I'm a big fan of Larry Carlton. A little more of the smooth fusion thing, but I still dig it quite a bit. His guitar playing is amazing. The first Jaco Pastorius solo album. I wanted to include him here somewhere, but again, most of his stuff is more band-oriented albums. So I went with Tony Williams, The Joy of Flying. Some good players on here. This is probably my favorite non-Lifetime album of his. And then Chad Wackerman, The View. Another really good vehicle for him and Holdsworth. You also got Jimmy Johnson on here and Walt Fowler. Really, really good album. I think don't sleep on the Chad Wackerman solo stuff, especially the early ones. Really, really good. And Holdsworth appears on most of them. So that's all I have, I think.
I haven't heard that in forever, man. I got to get my ears on that.
Yeah, that's really good. I picked a couple of his albums up, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that, and they're really good. I was just trying to get whatever I could that Holdsworth that appeared on, and I always love his playing. I mean, Chad is just an amazing, amazing drummer. One of those guys that doesn't get enough credit. Another guy I kind of like struggle with here, and I ultimately decided to leave him off is Pat Metheny. I'm a big Pat Metheny fan. but he really was always kind of a solo guy right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the Pat Metheny group, and he's done other albums that are just Pat Metheny. Like I wanted to include Bright Side's Life, which was his debut solo album, and he's got Jocko on that, and I love that album. But is it really a solo album, or is because he was really a nobody when that came out, right? So I decided to leave Pat off, but I love him. But I think that all these guys had done other things before, and I guess that's why they're in this show, right? So.
I think that's why I left Kazumi off, because I don't think of him as a band guy. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I included him only because he appeared on so many other albums for other people. Like, but yeah, he wasn't. I know it was difficult. I wanted to include him. Yeah, I mean, Kazumi, what a discography that guy's got, right? It's done a
he's a
million.
show unto himself.
Yeah, basically, pretty much, right? So there you have it, everybody. We'll drop these lists down in the comments below because I'm sure there's going to be people like wanting to check these albums out, and I know we rattled off a lot of them today. So yeah. So George, anything final to wrap up this year of 2023? We got a you want to give a little preview of the For Fusion Friday show that's coming up in just a little bit?
Yeah, next week we got our version of the top CDs of the year show. So we're gonna have our top four fittingly with honorable mentions, and we got guest Len Davis, the DJ from Australia, online DJ, and he keeps up on the scene, so I'm sure he's gonna have an interesting list as well.
Cool. So that's coming up in just about a week. So stay tuned for that, everybody. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together. All the damn time. I think we've beaten to get the solo album thing for this latter part of 2023. So, but this was fun. I'm glad we got to do this. And what's crazy is there are so many others that we probably didn't even mention. And hopefully some of you watching will make sure to list them down in the comments below because we could have easily done a top 40 or favorite 40.
A lot of really good solo albums we disqualified because guys weren't in bands,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean you didn't make a great solo album.
Yeah, true. So yeah, it's so many good ones. So I would argue that there's probably way more in this genre than there is in the rock world. But
Yeah.
so anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. For George Lamie, I am Pardo. Enjoy your weekend and Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.